Hello, Southfield. Welcome to the Southfield Roundtable. This is a show in which we can talk about issues that are a little bit uncomfortable, that make us a little nervous, but we speak to them in an atmosphere of friendliness and no judgment. So today, I am so happy to welcome our interim fire chief, Barry White.
Hello.
And our chief of police, Eric HAWKINS.
Good morning.
And my partner today, I was going to say in crime, but I'm surrounded by public safety people. My good friend, Barbara SELDON.
Good morning.
Good morning. We know Barbara as the treasurer now of the Dr. Martin Luther King Task Force here in the city. But she's also a dental technician. She's also an associate professor of, and you're going to say this for me, Barbara.
Department of Periodontology and Dental Hygiene.
Try to say
at
that
the
fast.
University of Detroit Mercy
Yes.
School of Dentistry.
She also travels all over the place as a speaker on this issue, and I'm really very happy to have her here.
Thank you.
So, you know, we've had a pretty tumultuous couple of months here in the city, actually in the country, but issues that really affect us. And that's what this show is all about. Anything that goes on in this country of ours or in the world that directly affects our city. So, you know, it's such an interesting time that we live in. We know that life has been a little difficult over these last couple of months with the loss of Chief Rowley. And so in a minute, I'm going to ask you how the department is getting along, how you're moving forward with the interim chief, and of course, with everybody learning how to work together. Yet again, changes are always difficult. We're also going to ask you, both of you actually, you're both in a very difficult position. What made you, both of you, want to be in public service, number one? Because if you're a police officer or a firefighter, you are working for the public. Some people don't get that. Some people think the public is working for them, and not true. So I'll start with, let's see, alphabetically, Chief Hawkins. What made you, as a kid, think, were you thinking about being a police officer? What happened to you? What terrible thing happened to you that made you decide to become a police officer?
And good morning, Uni and Barry and Ms. Selden. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to talk about some of these things. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of these things with the Southfield audience. But you ask, what got me into public service? Interestingly, when I was a kid, public service really wasn't something that I was thinking about. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, just like a lot of other kids. I wanted to be a professional football player and all that stuff. So just like other kids, we'd go out and we'd play, and everybody had dreams of being the next Barry Sanders or the next Michael Jordan and things like that. So, but at the same time, I had parents who instilled the importance of education and making sure that you do the right things and stuff like that. So, so it put me on a path where I would have an opportunity later in life to get into it. So, but what really drew me into it was after I played sports in high school and played a little bit in college, and it was about my after my first or second year of college that I realized I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, and I knew that I had to. It was something else that I had to get into, and so I had to choose a new career path, so to speak. And at that point, I knew I wanted to continue to go to school and trying to find my way through life and things like that. And at that time, I was paying my own way through college. And as we know now, college is expensive now, but it was expensive way back then, especially for a kid that's trying to do it on his own. And there was a police cadet on Southfield's police department way back in 1988 or 1989. His name is Uriel Vinson. He's a hometown kid, and he joined the police cadet program, and I knew Uriel from college. And so one day we ran into each other at school, and he said, "Eric, what are you into? What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm just kind of, just going to school, paying my way through, and I'm trying to get through it." And he said, "Well, who's paying for it?" Well, it's me. I'm doing it. And he said, "Well, Southfield has a police cadet program that allow you to come in and get exposed to law enforcement, and at the same time, they'll pay for your college." And I thought, wow, what a great program. And so I applied and I joined, and I got into it, and that's when I began to get this love for public service. I came in with the intent of learning about it, something new, and continuing my education. But when I got in, I just fell in love with the opportunity to serve others, and so got in and began to love it, and joined. It was later hired as a police officer after that, and the love just grew. And so it's really been a very, very satisfying career. It's been a great city. City administration has been very, very supportive. The folks in the community itself have been very, very pleasant to work with, and I tell you, I owe a lot to the city. And as I progressed through the ranks of the police department, I knew that I had to give back. It's not just going in and doing things for myself, but I knew that I had to give back to the community, and that's when I knew I wanted to get into the executive ranks of law enforcement, so that I can begin to shape the policy and shape the culture and things like that, so we can better serve the folks in this community.
Wow, amazing! It happened to you young.
Yes.
That's very exciting. Very.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Like
It's
Chief
so
Hawkins, I
good.
want to thank you for inviting us this morning, and this
My
is a
pleasure.
wonderful opportunity. And thanks again.
So what happened to you, you poor thing, in the early years of your life that made you want to do this?
Well, like Chief Hawkins, I thought I was going to be a professional hockey player.
Oh.
And so, and you'll find in public safety that there is a significant amount of our people in public safety that have a team sports background, especially in the fire service. But I found out that I wasn't going to be a professional hockey player in my first tryout for college, so I didn't get quite as far.
That's fascinating.
But I grew up in the city of Southfield. My father was one of the original career firefighters in Southfield. My uncle was the original captain of the Southfield Fire Department. So I had a knowledge of the fire department. But what really piqued my interest, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a canine police officer because I love dogs, and that's what I would read about. But there's a reputation in the Southfield Fire Department, and in my early ages, when I was forming opinions about things, we were, like now, forefront in a lot of the technology that was going on. In 1972, we started Southfield Fire Department with support of Providence Hospital, and city administration started one of the first EMS programs out of the fire service in the United States. In fact, we think we're the third fire department in the country to provide ALS paramedics. And as a kid, I remember my parents talking about that and how proud they were and how good the Southfield paramedics were. Growing up in Southfield, we had a lot of contact with public safety in a good way. The police officers coming to our school, John Grace talking about bicycle safety and community outreach from the fire department. I can remember in third grade going to Fire Station 1 and touring the fire station. And I remember asking the firefighter that was doing the tour, always the one asking questions, how many fires are too many? And I remember the look on his face, and he said, young man, one fire is one too many. So that was probably my first induction into public safety. After I left college, I worked in the construction industry, which is a good background for a firefighter, and realized that I just wasn't going where I wanted to go there, and still had some contacts with Southfield Fire Department. So when I had the opportunity to fill out an application here, I did, and was lucky enough to compete for the job, and started here in 1986. Like Chief Hawkins said, I think there's a couple conceptions about fire departments, and it's a blue-collar job and it's hard work, and it absolutely is. We're fighting a fire or doing some of the things that we do. It's physically demanding and mentally demanding, but it's a unique place for people to grow and have the opportunity to not only move from a labor level to middle management or a company officer where you're directing people on a daily basis. Then when the opportunity became to start joining the upper echelon, the executive ranks, I saw that early on as an opportunity for me to excel in a great organization. So I did quite a bit of extra education and saw that this is where I wanted to be, was help leading the men and women of the Southfield Fire Department and being part of the Southfield family and the Southfield community. I've been doing it for 29 years. And when we say the Southfield family, there's no truer statements that I've heard since I've been here. And we've suffered a loss lately, and the Southfield family, once again, is proven to be true.
That's fabulous. Well, Barbara,
Yes.
see, we had a little sneaky reason for being here with you today. We each have a disclaimer, and we need to get that out there because nobody will allow me to go forward if I'm not honest about this. Barbara, you're going to go first because we have a love of you both, of your departments, and there's a huge reason for both of us. Madame.
Well, it was a December day. It was a crisp, cool morning. Dawn had just broken. And my husband and I, Felix, decided that instead of making breakfast at home, we would go to Ramshorn right there on 12 Mile. And we were sitting down having breakfast. And we looked down upon the floor, and there was this lady. She looked ashen and blue. I said, oh my, she just had a heart attack. Well, I knew CPR. So I decided to do my CPR, and I did. But the thing about it is, boy, it wasn't about me and the CPR. It's about getting some breath into that young lady and pumping that heart so that she could stay alive. But it wasn't 3 minutes that I was doing the CPR that Southfield EMS was right there. I couldn't believe it. So I'm thinking, okay, they're going to tell me to move out of the way and let me take over. But whatever I was doing must have been okay. So this guy walks up and says, keep pumping. Don't stop pumping. Keep pumping. Let's not stop this. I guess they didn't want to interrupt the rhythm, okay? And so while I'm pumping and I'm talking about adrenaline was really flowing, but I'm calm and cool, he goes and he head tilts, chin lifts, and he puts this tube down her throat, intubates her. He connects an EKG and he connects an oxygen, and I'm still pumping, just don't stop pumping. When it was all over, she left Ramshorn unconscious, but breathing. Okay, so they took her to the closest hospital. But the thing that was interesting about it all was, as I got into my car, head for work because I had to be to work at 10 o'clock, I was so hyped, and so I couldn't believe I could feel the adrenaline. It's amazing. So it made me know what it's like to be in a really important situation and to be calm and cool, but yet something inside you was just racing. Oh boy, when I got to work, I told everybody I became a hero. I didn't even know it, okay? And then I would go back to Ramshorn and they'd give me free food. I had to stop going to Ramshorn so I could stop getting these free breakfasts for a while because I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like I just did what I knew. And then people say, did you put your mouth on her? I didn't think like that. Yes, I did. And I did what I had to do to save that life. I'm so proud, but what I'm more proud of is the response that we got from the fire chief, from the fire department, from EMS. They were right there, Johnny, on the spot. They did the job, and we saved a life. And 10 days later, she was on Christmas Eve at home with her family celebrating the holidays.
Wonderful.
It's a great story.
It's a wonderful story. So I want to tell you that I love you guys.
Well, thank you.
No question. See, we're so biased. So, for me, this all began when my husband became very ill. And I took care of him at home for probably 10 years. He had horrendous diabetes. It morphed into Alzheimer's. He was a total mess. In his good days, he wasn't that easy to deal with. He was Mr. Stubborn Mule. But he had these horrible attacks, and I would call 911. I called so often that the person answering the phone said, Ms. Rose, how can we help you? So this went on and on and on, and I didn't really want to put him into a nursing home. I thought I could handle all of this. And I have no family here, so it was me, kids. I was taking care of this. Well, he went totally cuckoo when his blood sugar went way, way down, and he was uncontrollable. So I called, and the EMS people came, and he was a wild man. He was a total wild man. And the police came as well because they had to protect the man in the truck and against my big husband, 5'7", but a maniac. And nothing was working. They couldn't get him to calm down. They couldn't do anything for him. But we have a piano. And I wish I could remember the firefighter who sat at my piano. I do not remember. But he sat and he started noodling. The minute he started noodling, my husband, because he was a singer, my husband was a cantor, had the glorious voice, and he heard that music, and it was a turnaround. So obviously I've never forgotten that. So years later, I was asked to head the millage proposal in 2011 to save our public safety, to save the library and Parks and Rec and roads. So I took on the challenge. And I recall that we hired a big guru guy to run the campaign. And the fire department was having a Saturday morning breakfast that they all cooked, and then they were going to fan out in the city with the brochures, "Save us!" And I was there, and I am not kidding you. This is true. The firefighters were sitting there looking at me like this. She's on the library board, and she cares much more about the library board than she cares about us. And Chief Thomas was sitting in the way back of the room. So I saw this, and the Mr. Guru guy was bumbling with the instructions, and I grabbed his mic and I said, I'll take care of this. And I looked at these men with their legs crossed and those faces, and I told the story about my husband. And I said to them, I recall saying to Chief Thomas, if you ever need me, I am here. And I acknowledged, of course I wanted some money for the library, but you were far more, to me, far more important. So I finished my speech, and I said, now get out there and conquer Southfield. And they all stood up like one person, and they left. But since that time, you are gods to me. So I just thought we both wanted to let you know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
So thank you for your service.
Oh my
I
goodness,
appreciate it,
yes,
yes.
absolutely. So we have rapid changes here in this city. Lots of different people moving in. This used to be, it was always a diverse city, for which I'm incredibly grateful. I would never live anywhere that's not diverse. But things have changed. And so we have some questions. How do you, and either one of you can jump up and answer. Suppose you have a really difficult situation. Somebody is acting out, somebody is unhappy, whether it be in a fire or in any kind of an altercation. What's different about our Southfield police? First of all, then I'll get to you. But we're not blind to the news. We're not blind to the horrors of Ferguson and Newark and all these places where the police and the people simply do not come together. Knock wood. We have not seen that here. I think we have not seen that here in Southfield. So what is it about our police department that is different from the police departments all across the country that are having these horrendous experiences on both sides?
Thank you, and that's a great question, Uni. And in the aftermath of what we've been seeing in Ferguson and Baltimore, New York and Florida and other places around the country, all of the law enforcement experts and criminologists, and they're all saying that there's this disconnect. There's a lack of communication between local law enforcement officers and the communities that they're serving. And so the solution to some of these things, they're saying, okay, police departments need to have more community outreach, more community policing related programs. We need to hire different types of officers and stuff like that. But here's the thing, and this would answers your question directly. We've been doing those things in Southfield for well over 15, almost 20 years. You know, we've been looking at, you know, back when I started, 25 years ago, the types of officers that we're hiring. We've been increasing the types of community-related programs that we're having. We knew way back, a couple of decades ago, that we needed to really connect with, you know, this community in order to, if something did happen, if there was some dicey situation, if there was some circumstances or situations that that became heated, emotional, that we would have this relationship where you know, we'd have an understanding. So way back when, we put police officers in our schools. We were one of the, you know, I was a school liaison officer back in the early 1990s. And even back then, we were one of the first police departments in the state of Michigan to have officers in the schools full time. I would get calls way back then from police departments all across the state. You know, how'd you guys institute this program? You know, would have been the outcomes and stuff like that. So we had that. Community policing officers. We've had those for years and years. But here's what's most recently what we've been doing to kind of address these problems. We all know we had the recession, you know, back in 2008 or 2009 or so. And public safety organizations, police and fire across the country, everybody had to, you know, they reduced their staffing because of budgetary pressures. And, you know, Southfield was no different. You know, between that time and now, we lost, you know, something like 25–30% of our sworn officers. But we did something that was counterintuitive back then. Law enforcement executives across the country during that period of time, when they were losing officers, they were taking officers out of these community-related programs, these community outreach programs, and putting those officers on the streets, because guess what? Yes, guess what? We need to have more officers. You know, we need to, you know, make sure we have, you know, officers on the streets, and it was important. But we did something that was a little different here in Southfield. During that period of time, when everybody else was reducing the number of community-related officers, we were increasing them. I added officers to the schools. I added officers to some of these task forces that deal with collaborations with law enforcement agencies at all different levels. We increased the responsibility of our community policing officers, and in our traffic unit, increased officers in there. And so what it did was, it helped us to put out some of the things that may be bubbling underneath the surface.
Put out the fire before it happened.
There you go.
So you're more proactive.
I was
than
going to say
reactive.
proactive.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that, because
Yep.
that's because your first thought is to get my police back and let's protect the city, something like this. But if you have the police out there developing good relationships among the people, you reduce the crime in front end instead of the back end, and so that's neat.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
The
Yes.
school liaison program had an effect on me. I'm a little bit old. I went to Southfield High in the 70s, and our school liaison officer at that time, I've had a relationship my entire adult life with, because of his influence in the high school. And we were one of the only high schools at the time that had a liaison officer. And we thought about that as, oh, there's a police officer in the school. Oh, we can't do anything wrong, you know. And it was completely opposite.
Yeah.
It was another person of authority in our school that didn't have the responsibilities of trying to educate us, had to and had the ability to educate us in life. So that was that's a program
That's
that had an
incredible.
effect on me
Yes.
and I went to high school in the 70s, and we were very unique at that time. And
Yes, that's incredible, because it's almost like having a camp counselor.
absolutely.
Your camp counselor is your friend, and this way,
Yes.
the uniform isn't scary. That's big,
Yes.
and you grab those kids when they're young. It's amazing. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, I
I
just
know
wanted
you
to
did.
ask Chief Hawkins, so with the issues that are happening today, is this program preventing us from having the same issues as places like Ferguson and Baltimore and the other places that you mentioned in Florida? Do you think that's the key to why we didn't have the impact that those other cities had?
I think absolutely. And in fact, during this period of time, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had use of force incidents in the city of Southfield. You know, we've had officers who've had to use their firearms in order to take people into custody, people who were doing bad things. And we've had some where the outcome was, it was a lethal outcome for the suspect. So we've had these use of force incidents in Southfield with barely a blip on the radar screen, and that's because when those things happened, I had key people, you know, in the city who would call me because they trust the police department that we're doing the right things for the right. We don't get a pass. Okay, nobody says, you know, we don't get that at all. It's made very clear. But there's this dialogue and there's this trust that goes both ways. Well, I'll get the question, you know, listen, Chief, I understand that there was a shooting, and what's happening? And let's talk about it so that we can spread the word and talk to other people in the community and let them know that, you know, police departments on and things like that. So yeah, Ms. Selden, I think absolutely those programs have had an impact because we really have established this connection and we've developed this trust with the residents in this community, residents and visitors and business owners as well in this community. So when things happen, and they will, we're gonna have some things happen in the future. That's just how it is in this business. People understand that we're doing the right things for the right reasons, and you know, we're transparent, and they can trust that they're gonna get the right answers.
Yeah. I just had a thought. Scarifyingly, I had a thought, and that is, has anybody asked you? Because to me, you know, I am so prejudiced. I have to say that you are the best. There is no question in my mind. You are the best. Has anybody across the country, any of the other departments, have they ever contacted you to ask your advice on how they can find? Can they work backward to fix things that they have totally destroyed, as far as I'm concerned? But that's just my bias speaking. Has anybody contacted you? Any from any other departments to see how the work that you are doing that makes this such a successful city? Of, you know, we're 70% African American and 30-ish% other people.
Something like that. Those numbers are pretty close.
So there's a little bit of an imbalance.
So we have had a real influx of people of color into our particular community.
Right.
But it hasn't changed the paradigm of Southfield being the center of it all.
But that's what I'm coming to. So what? So you couldn't be more correct.
Okay.
So in that context, has anybody contacted you through this mess to say, what are you doing and what can you teach us? Has any police department been that smart to call you and ask you?
And yes, and we get it all the time because we have a network, just like Acting Chief White has a network in fire, where we communicate and we're in constant dialogue with law enforcement executives and fire professionals across the country. I had the privilege back in 2008 of attending the FBI National Academy, which is considered the most prestigious executive law enforcement training that you can get in the world. And so I have contacts around the country, and around the world for that matter, of law, and so we talk. And so they've seen the demographics in Southfield, and they see that the racial demographics anyway mirror which they had in Ferguson and that they had in some of the other communities that had problems.
But has our crime been any different? Do we have high crime, or is it lower, or how does the crime relate to what's happening in the other places?
Thank you for that question, because we've had some great success with handling crime. We every year we look at our crime statistics and we compare, a 2 or 3 year period of time to see where we are. Well, last year when we did that, we decided, you know what, let's look back 10 years to see what happened. We know we've had short-term success, but what's happened over the long term? And it turned out the last year that the FBI released crime statistics was 2013. And so we look back from 2013 back to 2003. And what we found was astounding. We found that violent crime in this community had decreased by 76%.
Boy.
Okay,
that's amazing.
So that dispels that myth. The idea that people are coming in from Detroit and crime is going to skyrocket.
And not only, absolutely. And not only that, we've got our 2014 numbers, that will be officially published by the FBI probably within the next couple of weeks. And when those numbers come out, it's going to show that over a 10-year period of time from 2014 to 2004, it's gone down 81%. We've had an 81% decrease in violent crime during this period of time. What you talking about, Ms. Selden?
So how do you account for that? That's
I have an idea from a community point of view. I'm thinking that there are people who are moving in here who are middle class, who want to grow, who want to succeed, who want the same thing, to be happy, to be healthy, to be productive as everyone else. And so they may not bring all the values, they may bring a different culture, but they bring those psychological desires with them to this community. I think that helps out a lot.
You know, let me speak to what Ms. Selden said right there, because that's a great point. Because what we're starting to see in law enforcement is that the perception of satisfaction with the police, with law enforcement officers, it's not racial. When you're talking about,
it's not racial.
When you talk, and when you
it's
talk,
not racial.
and when
it's
you
class.
talk, there you go. It's socioeconomics. And when you're talking about what is contributing to crime in communities, it's not racial demographics.
Not at all.
It's a whole other slew of factors.
Like, here's what's getting me. There seems to be a flip-flop. So of all those police officers that are shooting African American 20, 30 times, I don't know the numbers, 11 shots in the back as they're running away, things like that.
Yes.
Well, what in the world is going on? It seems one by one, they're now shooting the police indiscriminately. And that's bothering me. So I thought about this and I said, well, you can't make the police love you, right? They're out there to do their job, so don't look for any love. Education hasn't worked, has it? Because I know they get the psychology of deviant behavior and the organization of human behavior and all those kind of classes in training as they're going along. So you can't get love, you can't get education. The legislation isn't applied. So all those rules and regulations that come out of our state administrators and legislative people isn't applied. So what do? You say, well, if I got to go, I'm going to take one with me. So I'm thinking that while I don't want to put this out in the universe that people are now getting ready to shoot off a cop just because I know. And there is this thought out there, and tell me if I'm wrong, that some of the youth feel like they're not going to live very long anyway. You know, some of our youngsters.
There is a bit of despair there.
Yeah.
Yes,
so they say, well, if I got to go, I'm taking one with me. I think there's some small amount of that is happening universally among those who are in the poverty area that you were talking about. It's not so much class, it's not having enough money to do what you need to do to succeed. So I just thought I'd bring that up and cut me up because I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
What do you both think?
I agree that it's the societal ills are not race related. They tend to be more economic.
Right.
And as the citizens or the population of Southfield has changed, especially as we went through the reduction in housing values, it brought people into our city that maybe couldn't afford to live in Southfield previous because of the cost of housing is reduced. So, but the people that have moved in here, when we're having our interaction with them, and often in the fire department, it's in the EMS, so it's more of an intimate relationship. We're walking into your bedroom, into your house, getting to know your family while we have this call for service. The basic needs of human beings are exactly the same. When it becomes time for you to need help, whether if you have to dial 911, for whatever that reason is, even though we have a view of maybe this person is coming from a different background, our base needs as human beings are still the same.
That's true.
And people want to feel safe, they want to feel secure,
Right.
they want to have trust in their public safety personnel. And I think that's one of the things that might have separated Southfield as we've changed was the trust in the public safety. Like I said, we talked about, I trusted police officers as a kid because of community outreach. We hear the stories of our firefighters and our paramedics entering houses and entering businesses and in both Southfield and Southfield Lathrop that are doing incredible work. And you talked about the bystander CPR and the system that's in place in EMS builds that trust for us. We see our personnel see people at their worst. Day in and day out, we see them at their worst, and we have to be the crutch that they rely on. And I'm proud to say in Southfield, we have that. I hope the citizens feel that way about public safety, and I'm sure they do.
Well, one of our students that was on our last program grew up in Southfield. He's one, well, I'm prejudiced about these two boys anyway, but that's beside the point. One of them said he was never afraid of the police, never. He talked about his dog losing a couple of dogs, running away, and all he had to do was call somebody. They found it. But this is a young man who's now, what, 17? And so he would be in that age group that, but he is, well, the upbringing is beside the point, but he has total trust in the Southfield
See, that's why I
police.
don't want to generalize,
Yeah.
because I
Yes.
said just a few of them, and that's
Yeah.
why it's not a lot of police officers that have been murdered, if you
Yes.
will, for
Yes.
no
God
good
forbid.
reason,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
But it's enough to say, stop, look, listen.
Well, I think also looking at each other, whether you're in these gorgeous uniforms or not.
You're so prejudiced.
And I'm terribly prejudiced. I'm guilty. But seeing each other as human people, just human beings first. This horrifying, well, I'm off the subject, but it's horrifying, the Syrian problem of all of these refugees. When they look at that camera and they say, we are human beings, and they're being treated like dirt. And it just seems to me that you have learned that. You have brought that to this city.
We all have to learn to value life.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people who don't value life. And particularly for our officers, you must insist that your officers value life first. And when you value life first, you won't have as many indiscriminate murders, if you will, indiscriminate shootings, if you will. I think that
What we really try to teach and impart in our fire department, and I'm sure it's the same in the police department, is that we try to leave our morals at the door when we walk in the
Oh,
morning.
that's interesting.
Because it's difficult
That's
when you walk into a situation that the background of the people are different, their upbringing is different. They might have been from a different country than you not only not grew up in this community, grew up on the other side of the world. I can't let my values when I walk through the door influence how I treat the people that are call us for our service.
Yes.
But let me say this, Zimmerman was a citizen. So he didn't have all of the training that
Exactly.
okay. The other gentleman was a businessman who gave a donation, and they let him on their
Yes.
allied force, or whatever you call it. So that's one thing I think we don't do in Southfield. Do we have that here
No,
in Southfield?
no, we don't.
Okay,
No.
so that's a good thing. So you've got people out there who are not properly trained. Now, is it true that there is a culture among the public safety officers that you support each other despite truth, despite?
It's
that's
in most cases, like Chief Hawkins was saying, I also graduated from the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and we have contacts all across the country. And Southfield is kind of unique. I hear other firefighters, fire executives, that the police and fire don't necessarily get along as well and work together as well as we do here in Southfield. And I think it's, it starts for us in the street with the EMS component of the fire service, and when we work together, it's a unique dynamic here in Southfield.
It is strange to me why the fire truck has to come along with the EMS. It seems I just need the EMS, but I get both of them, and I've had them
That's
at my
a
home.
very good idea. Two is better than one, darling.
Well,
Extra protection.
I don't know why they do that.
Well, we have to, often with the level of the call, takes more than 2 firefighter
Yes,
paramedics to deal
yes.
with the incident. Say a bariatric patient that's heavy, or a situation like the CPR, the cardiac arrest that you were on, you saw more. It was a lot to be done, right? So that's one of the things that we are working on in the future here is a new system so that we send the right resources to the incident. We've often sent more resources than we needed at times, but when you have a situation, we have 2 firefighter paramedics on an EMS unit and 2 firefighters or firefighter paramedics on an engine. So often our incidents take more than two human beings to
got you.
handle. So we send both trucks. And
Just in
it
case.
seems like a lot of iron,
Yeah.
but we need that big red truck with the water when your house is on fire
Yes,
or
that's
your
true.
building's on
Oh, what a
fire.
good idea.
So
And all the people in the community are watching what's going on over there.
we definitely do draw a crowd.
You sure
Well,
do.
yes, you're rather visible.
And we do that on purpose.
Of course.
And then Ms. Selden, you talked about the thin blue line. You know,
Yes.
do we do that? You know, I think decades ago that really was a problem. You know, I can remember when I started. You know, way back when. You know, there kind of was that culture. But right now, we're in the process of changing cultures of, I'm sure in the fire department, but certainly in law enforcement. And we are undergoing this change. And one way I'm doing that is by changing the type of officers that I recruit into law enforcement. We have to have officers who have the ability to communicate, who have interpersonal communication skills, and who value that. I can remember, you know, way back when I started, my first couple of days in the locker room, you know, the questions that I was asked from the senior officers, you know, it was stuff like, you know, how many push-ups can you do? You know, how many fights have you been in?
Oh my goodness.
You know, how fast are you? And stuff like that. You know, because it really was, that was the culture. And that culture led to that, you know, heels in the sand, you know,
Yes,
and stuff like that. But now, I'm not so interested with new recruits with how fast they are or how strong they are. I'm more interested in how strong are their interpersonal communication skills. You know, I don't want to know how many fights a new officer has been in. I'm more interested in how many fights is that officer, potential officer avoided.
Prevented, right.
And so those are the types of things. And I tell you, I've had to get rid of some new recruits simply because they did not have the type of interpersonal communication skills that I thought were necessary for this job.
Interesting.
Well, which brings me to a point. In Southfield right now, there has been this flyer, vote for these people because we need to keep Southfield white, get the blacks out. I don't know if you've seen that,
Of
but I
course.
wanted to say, do you feel that there is enough diversity among police and fire within our city so that we can keep a nice balance? Do you feel that? And number two, the officers who were on the flyer, have they come out and made a statement to counteract such ugliness? Because Southfield hasn't had these issues ever, and this is like unbelievable for us. And we're hearing it from Florida. Somebody called up, I saw you on the
Oh,
news. It's all
the
over.
UK Guardian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We got into London.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, to answer your second question
Manchester.
first, no, those officers have not come out and to defend, you know, because really,
What
there
can
was
they
really
do?
no necessary to defend it.
No,
The people,
I
I think the folks in Southfield are sophisticated enough to know that, you know, what this really was about. And this wasn't law enforcement officers, it wasn't politicians coming out saying this. I don't know what the motives were, I don't know who produced them, but I know that, you know, the way it was presented was not, and folks are sophisticated enough to understand that. So we didn't have to do that. But in the first question you brought about the diversity in the police department. Right now, again, you brought out, you know, the city itself is about 70% African American,
Right.
30% other, where the police department itself, and Acting Chief White's department is probably about the same. The police department is about 85% white. I think we're about 12% African American, and you know, the rest other. But here's an interesting thing about diversity in law enforcement across the board. There's this perception that there is a lack of diversity. And when folks talk about diversity, really what they're talking about usually is African American
No
representation in
question.
law
Of
enforcement.
course.
Okay, but here's something interesting.
know that.
Here's something interesting that you see when you look at things across the board. The African American population across the country is what?
ethnic diversity.
About 12.5 or something percent. Well, guess what the African American, the percentage of African Americans in law enforcement across the country, local law enforcement is? It's about 12%. So across the board, it's about representation. But here's the issue,
But
though.
that's from the national picture.
That's the
right?
national piece.
So if you take each little urban community,
That's where you're
That's where the
seeing the
divide
divide.
is. Right.
And the real divide is when you look at communities that serve agencies that serve populations of 100,000 or more,
So
and that's the
in-
dividing line.
so in Ferguson, for example, 78% of the community was African American. 78% of the tickets that were given out were given to African Americans. So the African Americans were beginning to feel that in order for the city to survive, they needed that money in order to keep the city afloat. So they were ticketing mostly African American so that they could have money to run the city. So it's different when you look at it from a global perspective as opposed to a local perspective.
Well, everything is local. You have to look at it local
Yeah, you
because
have
you
to.
live in local.
Yeah, so that's a beautiful statistic, 12%, 12%, all of it. But in reality, where the real issues are, I mean, I don't think you're going to see it happening in Lansing, or you're going to see it happening in some of the smaller rural areas in the state of Michigan, because you don't have the issue. Where you have the issues are in the generally urban populations, and that's what we need to focus.
Absolutely. And so when we're looking at it locally, you're absolutely right. The African American comprise roughly about 5% of agencies that serve populations below 100,000 or in this country. And so in ours, it's a little bit higher than that. But here's what we're dealing with, though, when we're talking about that. In the private sector, you can have rapid turnover in the workforce, in your staffing. And so you can rapidly change demographics, racial demographics in the private sector. In the public sector, especially when you're talking police and fire, people come into these professions and they stay for 30 years. And so we don't get an opportunity to even bring in the numbers to change this. So change racial demographics in public sector organizations are very, very slow. And so it's going to take some time to do that. And then when you do it, what happens when the composition of the population changes again? And that's what we're seeing. I mean, you've been around here a long time, Ms. Seldon.
Yes.
How quickly did the racial composition in the city of Southfield change? I mean, it was over like a decade or so.
It was pretty fast.
Where it changed like that.
And I came from Detroit.
Absolutely.
1993 was my year.
It's almost impossible to meet that rate of change in a public safety organization.
See, that's something that really needs to be out there. That is, I think, of everything we've said so far, that's the most impactful.
I've been in public safety in Southfield for almost 3 decades.
Yes,
and
3 decades.
The changes in our city in those 3 decades have been significant.
Yes.
We've changed the racial makeup of the city, we've changed the religious makeup of the city significantly, especially in my lifetime, but in my career, a huge amount of change. But I'm still here because we stay at this job a long time, and we would love to see our organizations mirror the community, but what it's going to take is it's going to take our organizations and organizations across the United States. I came into the fire service because I knew about the fire service. You came into the police service because you had a mentor who told you about the police service. We need to get to minority populations earlier in their life and explain the
education.
Not the education, it's more the opportunity that's available in public safety agencies.
And that's another thing, preparedness.
Yes.
A lot of people want to be things, but they're not prepared to be. So for example, if you need to be a high school graduate and you haven't graduated, how are you going to
go into that?
Right.
So that means you really go into the earliest grades. Seriously.
And we need to identify populations, especially in the fire service, we need to identify populations that have not necessarily come into the fire service, and those are the populations that we need to educate on the quality of life of like working in the city of Southfield, and the professional and personal opportunities that are available in public safety, because people think of public safety officers often at the base level because that's who they interact with as firefighters. And we're hiring a completely different employee than we were 30 years ago. We need, I said, the public's expecting 2 or 4 highly trained, possibly to the level of brain surgeon, physically strong, able to do all these things. So at one time, as the chief was talking about, we might have brought firefighters in who could get up the ladder the fastest, who was the strongest to do this. How many push-ups, interviews, how many push-ups you can do. Now we want problem solving. We want somebody who can walk into your house and understand that not only are they technically able to do the job, which the paramedics that you interacted with in your cardiac arrest were technically proficient as paramedics.
And knew that I was proficient and said, don't stop.
And that's what we looked for at a time in public safety. Now we need a person who's not only technically proficient, knows the laws and knows how to enforce laws, knows how to operate a fire truck, but also has the communication and interpersonal relationships
Savvy,
that can
yes.
come into a house and explain, you know, and deal with
Exactly.
the situation, or
Right.
a police officer who knows how to take an intense situation and calm it down. You know, those are the things that we're
That's-
looking for in public safety. So it's those.
So it's psychology. It's also IT. You have to know
Right.
all of that. It's not just running up a ladder. You're right.
We are hiring more the education level, at least in the fire service. What we're looking for people coming in entry level is drastically higher than it once was across the nation in the fire service because of EMS, because of hazardous materials. We have a lot of things that we're charged to deal with that are low frequency, high risk, technical rescues, hazardous materials, like I said. We're real good at the stuff that we do every day going out the door, but we need people that can make decisions. At one time, the firefighters they wanted to come through the door was the firefighter who could learn how to run the mop the best and say yes, sir. Now we're looking for people who can make decisions on the street without supervision, without somebody looking,
Split
doing the
second.
right thing every time.
So,
that's
and
what
that
we
was
look
going to be my question. Are you quasi-military? And do all of the equipment that they have in the government for the military, are we using that to protect and defend our communities, you know, with the mace and the...
We're quasi-military organizations.
Yes.
There's
Because it-
paramilitary
And do you buy
organizations.
your equipment like from the government?
No, we don't.
No.
No,
We- and
but we
yes.
have, in the fire service, we've used a lot of technology that has been developed in the military over time.
Okay.
Thermal imaging cameras,
Oh, yeah.
things like that.
And I'm going to interrupt you. Unfortunately,
Oh, no.
we have just about run out of time. Can you believe this?
I've learned
What
more
a
than...
discussion.
Yeah,
What a
that's
discussion.
fantastic. Yeah. Oh,
I
that's terrible.
thank you. I thank you so much for coming today
Thank you
to
for
be
having
with
me.
us.
Yes.
And we may have to have a repeat visit because there are so many more questions.
We got to talk about Fire Safety Week, October 4th.
That's
to
right.
10th.
Please mention
Hear the
that.
beep where
Yes.
you sleep. The fire smoke detectors are available at the Southfield Fire Department, all our fire stations. So we.
And I
Hear
thank
the
you
beep
for
when you
reminding
sleep.
us. Thank
you.
you, thank you, thank you both. Thank you, Barbara.
You're so
And
welcome, my
remember,
friend.
Southfield, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you think of this program. So you email us or call us. And remember, keep on talking Southfield. Thank you.